askreddit. What are some common facts that people believe to be true even if the existing evidence states the contrary? Worms come out when it rains because they are drowning in their holes. No, not really. They mostly come out because when it rains heavily, they are able to survive on the surface for much longer and move around, finding new areas to feed and more worms to breed with. Myth: the pool is definitely clean. It is such a strong chlorine smell. Fact: a strong chlorine-like smell, like the kind you associate with public pools, is actually an indication that the water is not chemically balanced. It might even be a sign that the pool needs more chlorine. Oh, my time to shine. I used to test pool water, hot tub water as a part-time job. This is what I learned from reading the material that the company gave me, but my advice always seemed to work, so I think it's pretty solid. There are two types of chlorine, free chlorine and combined chlorine. Free chlorine is generally odorless in the pool. It's the chlorine that can attack bacteria. Combined chlorine is chlorine that has already attacked some type of bacteria. It just stays in the pool and doesn't do much. That combined chlorine can make your pool smell like chlorine, or even make your pool cloudy. If a pool smells like chlorine, it has too much combined chlorine. To get rid of it, you need some type of oxidizer, like a calcium hypochlorite or something along those lines. So in other words, even if a pool smells horribly like chlorine, it can still be very unsanitary and unsafe to swim in. If the police arrest you and do not read your rights, the case will automatically be thrown out. That only invalidates any interrogation they conduct. To piggyback, that police have to read you your Miranda rights. Miranda only comes into play for questioning. If they don't want to ask you any questions, they don't have to read Miranda. That Einstein was a bad student, and was bad at math. It's just not true. He got average high marks, and was really just disdainful of the structure of school. And he was good at math. Physics is like 90% math. I get why people share it. It's to make struggling students feel better about themselves. But can't we tell them about something else instead of lying? Just show them the salary of a plumber or welder compared to their teacher's salary. That ought to cheer them up. Cutting your facial hair makes it grow in thicker. I had a full-on argument with an individual who firmly believed that genetics played no possible role in hair growth whatsoever. I have never been more perplexed or angry in my entire life. Sincerely, bald at 25. I'm a master aesthetician and I've studied hair growth, and I can confirm, shaving/waxing/plucking does not make more hair grow thicker or longer. The reason for this misconception is when you shave, it makes the tip of the hair blunt, so when that protrudes from the follicle, it appears to be thicker. The only change in hair texture/thickness/length/etc. occurs in the papillae, hair root, which is completely determined by hormones. A few people still believe that opening windows before a tornado to even the pressure will save their house from damage. Some also still believe trailer parks attract tornadoes and that random sacred landmarks can protect cities from tornadoes. The first part of that does have some merit though. Opening up all your windows will effectively reduce the total force being exerted on the walls from the outside wind, since some of that airflow is allowed to pass through the wall instead of acting upon it. However, considering how strong the winds are in a tornado and how small most windows are, the effect may as well be irrelevant. Opening your windows to reduce the damage from the winds of a tornado is probably about as effective as planting shrubbery to reduce the damage from an oncoming avalanche. The most violent arguments I've had have been convincing patients with a viral cold that they don't need antibiotics. I remember a documentary a few years back about a GP's practice here in the UK. Basically filming patients, with their permission, to show a day-to-day. They literally had people come in and answer, "What's the matter today?" with "I need some antibiotics." They didn't even elaborate on why, just "I need some antibiotics." Lightning never strikes twice in the same place. In fact, it does, and frequently. You don't want to be the when it happens. People still think an undercover cop has to tell you they're a cop. How does that even make sense? Months of preparations ruined on the first day because someone happened to ask the magic question. Cops are allowed to lie to you, and they will pretend to be your friend to get what they need from you. Side note, even if you're innocent of a crime, the first words from your mouth should be "I want a lawyer." And you don't provide any information until you have one. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. To your side note, the first and only words should be "I want a lawyer." Always, no matter what they try to tell you. I've practiced law both as a defense attorney and a prosecutor, and I have never once seen a person successfully talk their way out of something after being read their rights. Even if you're innocent, you're going to be stressed in not thinking correctly. What you mean to say will likely not come out exactly right, especially after a few hours of questioning. You'll likely contradict yourself at some point without realizing it or even meaning to, or what you say can be taken completely out of context. A person drowning is not likely to be flailing wildly and yelling like in the movies. Drowning can often happen with mostly silence, especially with kids. Read up on the signs. It might save a life. I was drowning and lost consciousness when I was 5. I was told I barely made a sound. I went under, sucked in lungs full of water when I tried to cry out in surprise, and blacked out. If it wasn't for my dad's instincts and quick action, I'd be dead. The site Spot the Drowning Child is a terrifying, but manageable, way to learn this. A lot of people think they can burn belly fat by doing crunches or slim their arms down by doing push-ups, but targeted fat loss isn't possible, and there's no evidence to suggest it is. Yeah, ab workouts just build up your core muscle and burn calories. The kitchen is where you lose the belly fat. It is rarely necessary to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. Your heart stops when you sneeze. I mean, have you seen my dad sneeze? No wonder the heart needs a break. Cracking your knuckles too often will give you arthritis. Nope, no conclusive study has ever backed this up. It just releases the gas from the synovial fluid in your joints, which is neither good nor bad. That shampoo has to make bubbles to be effective. Bubbles are artificially added just to let you know that you are doing a good job at cleaning your hair, and because you wouldn't buy a shampoo that doesn't foam now, would you? Also, it doesn't have to taste that bad. Not that I tried. Flavors and vomitives are added to prevent accidental poisoning. Alpha theory and dog training. The researcher that originally described the dominance theory was watching captive wolves at a zoo, a pack that was artificially created from unrelated specimens. The hierarchy in this curated collection was determined through fights and struggles for dominance, and this dynamic was then applied to domestic dogs and how they view themselves in relation to humans. This drove the dominate your dog style of training popular with Cesar Millan and his acolytes. When the scientific community was able to observe a wild wolf pack, however, they discovered that wild packs are family units and operate much the same way, with a parental breeding pair at the top and their younger offspring forming the pack, sometimes several litters at a time. As the pups grow older, they break off and form their own packs. The researcher that dismantled the theory, David Mesh, described it thusly: attempting to apply information about the behavior of assemblages of unrelated captive wolves to the familial structure of natural packs has resulted in considerable confusion. Such an approach is analogous to trying to draw inferences about human family dynamics by studying humans in refugee camps. Also, dogs are not wolves. Unless you're living with a hybrid, anything that applies to a wolf will not automatically apply to a dog. That being in a cold place causes common flu. I've been trying to convince my mother for 30 years that going to bed with wet hair will not make you wake up with a cold. She will believe it to the grave. Chicken is cooked when it is no longer pink and the juices run clear. In fact, it's cooked when it hits 75°C, 165°F, and that's it. What it looks like depends on the cut. Chicken breast often has significant pink in it when it hits the temperature, which is why most people complain about dry boring chicken, because they overcook it. On the flip side, wings can look cooked when they aren't, which is why they're a major source of food poisoning. The most important thing I learned working in a commercial kitchen. Pandora opened a jar not box. It was a mistranslation of Pithos to Pyxis. That 12-step programs get addicts clean. The truth is that their efficacy hovers at 5%. That's exactly the same as quitting cold turkey. There's plenty of researched and scientifically tested methods that works better. It's just that the AA model of always an addict, nothing else works is so ubiquitous in American, and to an extent other countries, culture that most people, including a lot of addicts, think that's all there is. Sugar rushes. Some studies were done and it's mainly just little kids acting like little kids, and their parents expecting them to act up after having sugar from decades of saying that's what is supposed to happen. No evidence actually points to them being any more worked up. It's something I've brought up and been ridiculed for it, and despite saying just Google it, I'm still perceived as wrong. I think it's a case of psychological priming. If you expect a certain type of behavior, you will be much more attentive looking for it than you would otherwise. Since we all know sugar sends kids into a hyperactive state, then we are much more likely to interpret any energetic playing as excessive even when it's the same as normal. You can't jump into lava. It's still rock, regardless of whether it's liquid, so you would just break all your limbs against the surface. Then the water in your body would superheat and evaporate, expanding as it does and causing your body to explode in a puff of red steam. The dried remains would burn or melt away,